Welcome back to the channel. Today we're discussing something a little different. I have an article here instead of a book, and it's from the November-December 2024 edition of Foreign Affairs. Now, some of you might laugh. Foreign Affairs obviously is a globalist journal that holds views that I find repugnant. But that's what's interesting is it's important to know what the enemy is thinking in order that you can counter the arguments more effectively. But every now and then you'll run into an article that's got a lot of helpful information. And this one, the title of the article is The Age of Depopulation, Surviving a World Gone Gray by Nicholas Eberstadt. Now, those are the two axes of the article, the age of depopulation, so talking about declining birth rate, but also surviving a world gone gray, the sort of increasing number of old people in relation to that. So how do you deal with this dual pressure? Not enough people being born and a lot of people aging. How are we going to pay for that? How are we going to take care of those people? These are both important questions. What's interesting is how clueless these people seem to be about the situation, despite having access to a lot of data. So, for example, you can see this chart. Everything's going down in every country. Straight down. It doesn't matter how quickly they're going down. That's the birth rate. And I put exclamation mark next to it. I couldn't really believe that that's what's going on. Here's some of the wording behind that data. For half a century, Europe's overall fertility rates have been continuously sub-replacement. Russian fertility first dropped below replacement in the 1960s during the Brezhnev era, and since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia has witnessed 17 million more deaths than births. Like Russia, the 27 countries of the current European Union are about 30% below replacement today. Together, they reported just under 3.7 million births in 2023, down from 6.8 million in 1964. Last year, France tallied fewer births than it did in 1806, the year Napoleon won the Battle of Jena. So 2023, which was last year because this was released in 2024, 1806 was the last time there were fewer births. Italy reported the fewest births since its 1861 reunification, and Spain the fewest since 1859 when it started to compile modern birth figures. Poland had its fewest births in the post-war era in 2023, so did Germany. The EU has been a net mortality zone since 2012, and in 2022 it registered 4 deaths for every 3 births. The UNPD has marked 2019 as the peak year for Europe's population and has estimated that in 2020 the continent entered what will become a long-term population decline. The United States remains the main outlier among developed countries, resisting the trend of depopulation. With relatively high fertility levels for a rich country, although far below replacement, just over 1.6 births per woman in 2023, and steady inflows of immigrants, the United States has exhibited what I termed in these pages in 2019, American demographic exceptionalism. But even in the United States, depopulation is no longer unthinkable. Last year, the Census Bureau projected that the U.S. population would peak around 2080 and head into a continuous decline thereafter. Those are all reasonable predictions, reasonable points made, all pulled from data that's publicly available. So what is going on here is something new in recent times. So let's say recent in the last, in many centuries. And here's what I mean by that. Human beings have no collective memory of depopulation. Overall, global numbers last declined about 700 years ago, in the wake of the bubonic plague that tore through most of Eurasia. In the following 7 centuries, the world's population surged almost 20-fold. And just over the past century, the human population has quadrupled. The last global depopulation was reversed by procreative power once the Black Death ran its course. This time around, a dearth of procreative power is the cause of humanity's dwindling numbers, a first in the history of the species. A revolutionary force drives the impending depopulation, a worldwide reduction in the desire for children. So far, government attempts to incentivize childbearing have failed to bring fertility rates back to replacement levels. Future government policy, regardless of its ambition, will not stave off depopulation. The shrinking of the world's population is all but inevitable. Societies will have fewer workers, entrepreneurs, and innovators, and more people dependent on care and assistance. The problems this dynamic raises, however, are not necessarily tantamount to a catastrophe. Depopulation is not a grave sentence. Rather, it is a difficult new context, one in which countries can still find ways to thrive. Governments must prepare their societies now to meet the social and economic challenges of an aging and depopulating world. I just want to pause there for a second. There's a lot there. If you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting like or subscribe. It's a way to get this content out to more people. So let's think through a few things here. A revolutionary force drives the impending depopulation, a worldwide reduction in the desire for children. The desire for children and the way that children come about are endemic to our species. We are born with this. And to elect not to have children, not because the bubonic plague is coming through and killing everybody, but choosing not to have children when you are healthy and able to do so and are engaged in a committed relationship, points to major structural problems with humanity. They're sort of jumping forward and say, oh, we have to address this at the state level. Forget about the state level. If we don't fix this with humans, you could forget about the states. The question is built on grace and nature. So there's the natural world, there's the supernatural world. The supernatural world has to build on something in the natural level. It can't build on nothing. In the natural level, young children, what do children represent to a society? At the very base level, they represent hope. Obviously, at a practical level, they represent additional helpers around the household, additional siblings for other children. But at its base level, it represents hope in the future. The idea that there will be something after I come along, and I'm going to hand that to these children. Family is the base unit of society, not the individual. That is a so-called Enlightenment idea. Family is at the base of society. So if there is no hope in the future, people stop having children. The supernatural part of that, the grace that builds on nature, is that it's a command from God. God said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. This earth is underpopulated in many ways. The World Economic Forum people would have us believe, the Bill Gateses of the world, if those are the people from whom you get your information and the people that you trust, well, I don't know that I have anything else to share with you. But we know that when those people say something, the opposite is true. So if they tell us it's overpopulated, really, we're underpopulated. But these two problems are much, much bigger than, oh, how are we going to figure out how to take care of the old people? Or how are we going to deal with the not having enough workers? Also ignores the issue here that doesn't get talked about in the article at all, which is just in my country, the United States, 60 million children have been killed since abortion was made legal in the country. 60 million. Among those 60 million people could have been any number of people who could have done great things for mankind at the spiritual level, at the medical level, the environmental level, the economic level, but we'll never know because we got rid of them, because we convinced ourselves that it's okay to murder children and that it's about someone's choice to murder somebody. And to pretend whenever you listen, these people know that it's a baby. They can call it whatever they want, but they're killing a baby. And that is something hidden in all this question is, why are we talking about depopulation? Well, what if you added those 60 million back in, plus the children they would have had, and then look at the numbers that were killed all across? China is facing a huge problem now because of what they forced on their population, the one-child policy. So that's the question that you have to ask yourself. Why have people lost hope at the natural level? And why are they disobeying God's commandment to be fruitful and multiply? Obviously, that applies to people in marriage. It doesn't apply universally to everybody. Obviously, monks and religious, nuns, priests, they cannot be fruitful and multiply because they've chosen something better. And they are, in a sense, being fruitful and multiplying. They have spiritual children. They have people who they mentor. So they are obeying the command, but in another way. But the point that I'm trying to make is, what is it that's causing a loss of hope? Is it because our society is so advanced and we're so great and we figured everything out? Or is it because instead we have destroyed hope within ourselves and we banished God from our society? And big surprise, there are major consequences for that, which we can't spy at the moment, but they're out there and they're pending. I wrote LOL next to this because The worldwide plunge in fertility levels is still in many ways a mystery. It is generally believed that economic growth and material progress, what scholars often call development or modernization, account for the world's slide into super low birth rates and national population decline. Since birth rate declines commenced with the socioeconomic rise of the West, and since the planet is becoming ever richer, healthier, more educated, and more urbanized, many observers presume lower birth rates are simply the direct consequence of material advances. But the truth is that developmental thresholds for below replacement fertility have been falling over time. Nowadays, countries can veer into sub-replacement with low incomes, limited levels of education, little urbanization, and extreme poverty. Myanmar and Nepal are impoverished UN-designated least developed countries, but they are now also sub-replacement societies. So the narrative used to be, oh, poor societies, they have a lot of children. But that's not even true here in the statistics they're showing us. During the post-war period, a veritable library of research has been published on factors that might explain the decline in fertility that picked up pace in the 20th century. Drops in infant mortality rates, greater access to modern contraception, I put bing, higher rates of education and literacy, increases in female labor force participation, bing, and the status of women. All these potential determinants and many more were extensively scrutinized by scholars. But stubborn real-life exceptions always prevented the formation of any ironclad socio-economic generalization about fertility decline. I want to comment on that, but I'm going to read one more thing before I do. Global fertility has plunged since the population explosion in the 1960s. For over 2 generations, the world's average childbearing levels have headed relentlessly downward, as one country after another joined in the decline. According to the UN Population Division, the total fertility rate for the planet was only half as high in 2015 as it was in 1965. By the UNPD's reckoning, every country saw birth rates drop over that period. When I said bing bing about the what had happened with women and the idea, oh, it's a mystery, we don't know what's going on. But then they said, okay, there's greater access to modern contraception and there's increase in female labor force participation. We managed to tell multiple generations of women that it was below them to be a mom, that being a stay-at-home mom was trash. What you needed to do was go out and be an independent boss babe who didn't need no man. And they have gotten what they wanted. They are more educated in many parts of the world than the men. In some places, they make a lot of money compared to their peer group. And yet women are unhappier than they have ever been in history. They are taking more antidepressants, and speaking for the United States, but I know that this is parallel in other Western societies, and I wonder maybe in Eastern societies as well. Women are taking more antidepressants despite being more educated and wealthier. So clearly, the lie was, if only you just compete with men, everything's going to be great, and you can have it all. And this generation, I would say, this rising generation of women has begun to realize that this was a lie. In parts. Some are doubling, tripling down into the narrative or just owning it and say, yeah, I'm so happy I don't have kids. And then we'll see what they think in about 5 or 10 years. But the idea was, if you do this, then things will be better. But the reality is things are much, much worse. And not just worse for them, but worse for all of society. Because there is no greater work on earth than forming a child. And women have done this traditionally much more than men. All throughout human civilization. And I've said this before in numerous contexts. I don't know if I've said it on the channel, but even when God speaks about love to us, naturally speaking, in Scripture, he speaks about it in a feminine way. He talks about, he was speaking about Jerusalem as a chicken wants to grab her chicks close to her. So have wanted to bring you close to me. Or can a mother forget her child? These are concepts that are deep in our society. When we talk about a deep, enduring love, we relate primarily to the feminine. It isn't that fathers don't love their children, but mothers have this incredible job. And the idea was the lie was told to all these girls. You know what you're going to be wondering about on your deathbed? About how great your career was. Or, gosh, I wish I'd sent one more email. I wish I'd had one more meeting. when the reality is the thing that these women will be wanting on their deathbed is the time that they'd spent with their children. The contribution that you would make raising one good child for this world and for God, as opposed to being a really great marketing exec. What's your legacy? Is that your legacy? You were a really great cog in a machine? Or even, let's say you built your own business and you employed people, and I'm all for that. Being an entrepreneur who employs people myself, I love that. But is that what you're going to be thinking about in your deathbed? All the people you employed? All the paychecks that you helped write? No, it's going to be the connections that you made, most likely with the people closest to you. And women have this incredible opportunity to grow a child inside them and then form them. And they bought the lie that that was not an important job. They bought the lie that instead of doing that, where they exercised incredible power over society, they decided that what they needed to do was go compete with men in the workforce. And now all of us are brought into the lie because the market adjusted. As we have dual incomes, everything goes up in price. And so now the employers, they get twice as many workers for half the price. Back when, and you can just go back and look at the math, go look at how much homes used to cost when the majority of homes were single income. Something like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a house. And now they're $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in America. Homes are not 10 times larger, and the income, the money, as crazy as it is, hasn't become 10 times less powerful. It's because the market has adjusted to dual incomes. So women get to do more work and they spend less time with their children. They're less happy. And oftentimes they choose divorce. And even then they're unhappy afterwards because they realize that was a lie too. They said, oh, if you just get this divorce, you'll be happy then. And then they're not. So as I said, and I didn't even look at the second pivot of this article. I'm going to put a link in the description. You can read it yourself. If you don't already have a Foreign Affairs free account, you can create an account for free and get access to one article, and you can read this one if you want. I didn't even get to the pivot of this article, which is, okay, what about the people who are getting older? Because that isn't germane to what I wanted to talk about today, which is these people are, because they're entirely naturalistic, are incapable of seeing that what's behind all of this is a deep ache in the human soul. We do not have hope in our future, and we do not have God in our lives. And as a result, we are choosing not to have children. We are choosing not to get involved in these. This is a disaster of our own making. And unlike what these fools at Foreign Affairs think, there is not going to be a human solution. There are no natural solutions to supernatural problems. What we're facing is a supernatural problem. And until we get that fixed, we're not going to fix the natural problems. So, as I said, a different type of review from what we normally do. And I'm not going to say that it's going to be a trend because I don't read a ton of magazines, periodicals. I have a lot on my plate with books. But if you would like to get a copy of this, as I said, there'll be a link in the description. If you want to thank me for this review, there's links to PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. If you want to get ongoing access, early access to reviews like this one, as well as a exclusive monthly video in which I answer questions from you all or share what's going on behind the scenes, there's Patreon and YouTube membership. There's also my Amazon wish list where you can go through and find a book that you like, buy it, send it my way, nominate it. You could say sponsor the video. You'll also see books on Palestine. That's for my Palestine bookshelf project if you want to check that out. But in any case, it's a way that you can get the book to the front. And as I said, the easiest way you can support the channel is by hitting like and subscribe, using that hype button, whatever it is. I think that all helps the channel. So please consider doing that if you haven't already done so. Until next time, enjoy your reading.